You're listening to Copy Chief Radio. Get all the episodes and join the community at copychief.com.
Hey everybody, welcome. It's Kev, and I'm here today with Aaron Winter. It's my first time interviewing Aaron. Surprisingly, if you've been around the direct response industry for a while, you surely know about Aaron, but he's not your typical guru type, so you might not know a lot about exactly what he does, which is a lot of things. He's been more of a stay-at-home dad, taking care of his special needs son for the last few years. Despite that, and not even owning a smartphone, he somehow managed to start a truck factory, a Hollywood studio, a federal staffing agency, a chocolate shop, a comedy version of LinkedIn, a yoga center, and a new full-service DR copywriting agency in Lagos, Nigeria. So this is a man who does not sit idle very often. Aaron, it's great to have you, and I'm excited for this conversation.
Thanks, Kevin. And if you want to ask me for an explanation of any of that, I'm probably the last one who understands it myself, but I'm certainly happy to give you my theories about what any of that means or who it involves or what it is that we're trying to do.
We'll get into that because I'm always fascinated when people who run or are part of consult many different businesses, because it shows us something else about how we can think and act, as opposed to getting so hung up on little things. But I want to start with your home life right now. We all know that as entrepreneurs, and particularly in the copywriting world, once you've established your value and you understand business and you understand conversion copy, it can take you all kinds of places, and it gives you the flexibility to focus your time on what seems most important. Right now, that's your child. Tell me what it's like to kind of flip roles and spend most of your time at home doing that.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And I appreciate the platform. And it's funny, I didn't really know we would start here, but in a way, it's something I really would like to speak to, because I think maybe that's something I could contribute to the conversation that hasn't been covered as much in some of your other podcasts. To me, there's so many things that are a blessing about, I want to use the word career, but I'm not really sure that's accurate in 2024. Whatever it is we do, sometimes I call it Cosa Nostra, is like the closest name I could give to it. Whatever or however it is we do this, it's certainly very flexible and malleable to the shape that you need it to be. And I think for me, I actually only started in this path, so to speak, in 2012. So even in that relatively short period of time, it's taken a lot of forms for me. And there's been times that I've been working really hard and dreaming about copy and editing and dealing with publishers and clients, in my sleep, those really boring dreams you have that just kind of continue right on from the day that you had. And then right now, like you said, I'm in a mode where I'm less active, particularly when my kids come home from school. And it's been able to form and shift into the shape that I need it to be. And I'm very grateful for that. And if I have a gospel to share, it's just to say, it is on you to try to shape your ambitions and your opportunities to the shape that you need them to be to make the rest of your life work. But I say that as someone who kind of feels that I'm lucky that I've been able to do that, and not it doesn't come out of some mastery or subtle insight. Because the other thing I really want to share, and any conversation is going to come down to, is you mentioned the word guru. I thought that was fun. So a lot of times when we write copy, and it depends on the style of the promotion, but a lot of times we'll take the work of a whole group or collective of people, and just for a shorthand, we'll say, well, this is all Joe. Joe's a genius. Joe is the man on Mount Rushmore and the man on the mountaintop, and he contains all these multitudes, and you have a personal relationship with Joe. And then if it's financial, we say, but not really a personal relationship, but very much like a personal relationship. But, conversely for me, in this enterprise side, in this side of dealing with copywriters and being a matchmaker and a connector, in the same way that you are, I want to present myself as an anonymous collective on the exterior, even if in some senses I might be a guru or a miniature corner boss or a godfather kind of on the inside. And so a lot of the ways you can start to understand my world are, as we have this conversation, a lot of names will start to pop up. And those are just the names of the people who live in my world and live in my neighborhood. And in some weird way, they connect back to me as a hub, but also those names themselves are hubs. And so I think the other answer to what the career provides to us potentially for everyone is just the flexibility of schedule, the flexibility of delivery, the flexibility of coordination, the flexibility of contracting and all that other stuff. I have a guy who works for me. He's from Lagos, but he spends most of his time in Rwanda. But right now he's in Fiji, which is that's like the copywriter thing.
Right.
But for us, and the thing that I've really tried to push on whenever I do educational material or whenever I'm counseling copywriters, so to speak, like I think if you have rudimentary social skills, which most of us are barely getting there, but if you can build this from a networking standpoint instead of just from a lone wolf standpoint, like the copy textbooks from the 1970s will tell you to do, this sort of Bushido, climb the mountain and defeat the Zen master sort of stuff. It's cute. But like, if you can build your interaction with this amorphous sort of like capitalist vacuum cleaner, and you build it with a group and with a network, you're just expanding. You might be expanding your possibilities or you might be expanding like your revenue streams. But for me, it's like you're expanding the flexibility of the way that you can interact. Every single time I add another node to the network, which is another relationship or another way of working with someone, and in particular, if I add like inner nodes, like someone who's close to me and really multi-talented, like a Dan Ferrari or a Julie Hassett or some of these people who have been big in development for me, those people are providing so many other opportunities and contact surfaces that are allowing me to turn my life in the shape that it needs to be. And that's like a very abstract way of answering it. But most of the answers for me have been, number one, like the whole e-commerce DRM thing is like very flexible to begin with if you can reach that. Like you said, that platform or that minimum of effectiveness and reputation and what have you. But then the second layer for me is that inner networking game has made my life so much more flexible. So I think the point being like, I don't know, what goes around comes around, or the love you take is equal to love you make, because the opportunities that come back to me now because of all the relationships that I've developed and the seeds that I planted and so on. My joke with these guys is like, I'm the Walmart greeter now. I'm kind of the grandpa because, to some extent, I train person X who train person Y who train person Z, but now person Z comes back to me with something and like that opportunity connects to one thing to connects to another. So like, if I have anything to offer or share, it's just to say like, there's so much in this line that like leads you to isolate yourself because it's very performance driven and it requires a lot of concentration and it requires a lot of synthesis really for you to do as one mind. But socially, to my experience, like the more you connect yourself, the more flexibility you create in the way you plug or the way that you interact and the more surfaces of contact you're creating. So the long punchline being, that's what's allowed me to like make my life work. Because my wife, she has things that she wants to do. She has career ambitions. She's in DC right now at a big meeting and she's sneaking out to the meeting to do another interview because she's like on her grind and that's what she's about. Meanwhile, my whole day is I got one son coming home from the school bus in 7 minutes and I got a note from my father-in-law on the door because that's how I decided to solve that problem. And then I got another son coming home in an hour. I got to pick him up in 1 hour and 2 minutes. And so I know, see, that's the call, right? Hey, Bob, I'm recording a radio show. I left a note for you on the door. Is that cool? Yeah, that's perfect. All right. Thank you. So this other one, I know exactly how long we have to record this podcast. And the minute we're done, I'm the sprint half a mile right to the door of the school and pick that dude up. And we got therapy appointments and doctors and all this other stuff. Because like you were saying, my little guy has a lot of needs going on, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Like it really fits for me, but it's taken a lot of effort to put it into that shape and kind of build that as a household. The point is, it's not just me who did that. It's everyone else giving me grace and being flexible to me and maybe giving me back the flexibility and grace that I've given to them. And just the honesty that it takes to tell people what you can and can't do when you are and are not available. It takes a lot of time to build that, but it's been worthwhile. And it's the only way that my life works, right?
Yeah. And that's in the simplest forms, a growth mindset as opposed to a scarcity mindset. We both coach copywriters and creatives. And to me, that's one of the first defining factors on their capabilities for their own growth is, do they need to get past any scarcity mindset? Because people with that look at other people like you who accomplish so much and go, well, they're just built differently. Was there ever a time in your life where you didn't feel like you were empowered to have this flexibility and endless opportunity?
I mean, I think we all get a sense like you can use a lot of big words and you can make it systematic and you could build a textbook and all that stuff. And I usually tell people, you're just kind of going to feel sick in your stomach if something's not right. And you're just going to feel kind of stuck in like a trapped animal. And there's like this urge in you that like wants to get out of that trap and be free. Yeah, there's been times. For me, like if there's anything weird about me, I think I experience that feeling really easily. It seems like whatever I get myself involved in, like 3 or 4 years later, somehow or another, it's all wrong and I'm trapped and I kind of have to renegotiate the terms. And that used to be real shit like, I have an academic PhD and I'm involved in a professorial career track and they want me to live in Idaho and my wife doesn't want to live in Idaho, like real traps that can trap you for the rest of your life. Or like I have a W-2 job, it's like a good employer, but they don't let me run the copy team the way I want. We're arguing over royalties, little bear traps. And like I think the sign that things are going well, if you take that way of looking at, is like increasingly the traps you get caught in will just be the ones you made yourself. And so now at this point, I'm kind of like, damn, why is it like this? And then if I ask one of my friends for advice, be like, well, Aaron, those are literally the exact parameters that you designed for yourself. And I say, well, they don't work anymore. One of the other big jokes about us, and this is just nomenclature for anyone listening to figure out who they're talking to and why, is like we have inverse gurudom, which I call the clown car. So out of the clown car comes Dan Ferrari, Julie Hassett, Ning Li, Mike Abramov, Jen Adams, all these other people that everybody knows. David Deutsch like hangs out on my Slack board, all the clowns in the clown car. But the other thing to it is I found a need to like just redefine even our group because of, I don't know if it's my personal change or just the fact that I'm like the chief of vibes or something. That's the next alarm. That's the next thing that has to be taken care of for the kids. All right. So you're getting all the good interruptions. So you may have heard of Dig.In. Well, for a while we were Dig.In because the purpose of Dig.In was to create contracting opacity with Agora. I learned that trick from Marcel Allison. But then at a certain point, we were diversifying, having a lot of clients in and out of financial and health and all this other stuff. So we started calling it Dig Out. That was a diversification move. We were still in an agency format. At some point, because I got busier with the kids, stuff wasn't completely being intermediated through me. All of a sudden, a lot of my, mentees or my nodes were sort of becoming primary hubs. And all of a sudden, the money is kind of more flowing to me in a mastermind way. Like they're paying me for my time, for mentorship, or I'm getting paid by referral, or maybe in a little bit more like the way that Kevin operates, or I'm getting like these pieces of adversarial things. So we started calling that Dig.On. And now our ambition is like just to make sure that our parents don't understand our job, So there was a certain time where e-commerce DRM is like, oh, what is that? I don't understand it. And then with COVID and Zoom and all this stuff, it's like, oh, you sell things on the internet, you talk on Zoom, like, okay, I get it. So like, then we had to get the mastermind format. But then as soon as we figured out that it was a mastermind, that seemed like way too normie for us. Oh, everybody has a mastermind. So like the thing we have now is almost more like a Moroccan bazaar like trading collective where cryptocurrencies go back and forth, investing ideas, referrals, hiring market, VC stuff, and so on. And like the reason I know that it's thriving is, first of all, I don't have that bear trap feeling at the moment. And second of all, like I can't really describe what the strategy is. And I can't really describe exactly the way that these people are relating to one another. I'm not trying to tell everyone to be as goofy as we are, but like you should be surprising yourself and you should be around, you said growth mindset. I think that's one way to put it. Like you should be around people who are surprising themselves and surprising one another. And if you have a pretty good way of understanding and describing your strategy, like that's great. But I think that would be, to be fair, like you're describing your previous strategy. in all likelihood, the thing that you're actually doing now, or the place where the growth is taking place, or the things where your fingers are really put in contact, you probably don't have an apt description of that. And if you do, you're probably prematurely optimized. So that's why I try to be honest when people say, what are these activities you're doing? What are you doing? How's it all work? And it's like, I don't know. Don't ask me. I'm just growing the tendrils of this plant out to where it seems like the sun is shining.
Mm-hmm.
But that's, the vocabulary you're giving is similar to that. Because the scarcity mindset, another way of putting that is just to say it's a fighting previous battles mindset. It's a sense of, what is optimized for, what kind of values and goods and services are the ones you want. And so you can only have a scarcity mindset about things that are structured and defined. A growth mindset isn't to say, well, I wish to grow by having like more of the same kinds of things I know. Like a growth mindset has to be reaching toward the unknown and to the things that are unstructured and unvalued. And I think for me, I think that I'm just really sensitive to it. I'm not sensitive to scarcity per se. Like I'm sensitive to like, if I don't have enough feeling of growth or enough feeling of surprise or enough feeling of confusion, that's when I get my icky like bear trap feeling.
Yeah. I can't help but go here because it's so relevant to something I'm experiencing. Are you familiar with the book, The Middle Passage by James Hollis?
No, tell me about it.
Man, it's like rocking my world. He's a Jungian psychiatrist. It's basically redefining the midlife crisis as everybody calls it. It's not a crisis. It's a passage because when you get to a certain point in life, usually in your 40s, 50s, it is time to shed your first adulthood and begin a second adulthood. And it's relevant to what you were saying about the scarcity mindset being sort of like etched in the things that we've known. And it's given me such relief because I was walking around with this feeling at this point in my life. I'm 50, just turned 54, saying, why am I so sort of like restless and discontent in my personal being? And is it normal? Because there's been no crime. I didn't go off the rails. I didn't, but what, so what is the problem?
What would be inciting it? Yeah.
Why are things that used to be everything and it's completely normal. And the whole illumination of the book is that in context of a long marriage, I don't know how long you and your wife have been together. I've been married for 24 years. When you get to the middle passage, if both parties aren't willing and capable of becoming them whole selves, and then moving on together, it's going to be very challenging if only one party is sort of up for that or aware of that.
You marry one person, and this is like where the vows are showing a little bit of antiquity. And they say, do you take this person? And they give you a little bit about the bumps and the trials in life in this sort of like pre-modern way, like a lot of rough shit's going to happen. But they don't tell you the postmodern part about like, just shifts in role and shifts in identity and the new forms that the marriage will have to take. For me, it's like we are on year 17 and we know each other for longer than that. You reach that point, you want to talk about middle passage, like in marriage, you reach that point where you know someone for more than half of your life, which means you know them longer than you don't know them. And you kind of can't necessarily remember who you even were before. And I feel like I'm getting there with some of my professional relationships too, to touch on the other topic. But like, I don't know, I've heard it said, I'll define that as being like sort of a Gen X-y sort of book. And I'd be interested to know the publication year and like the sort of the bona fides of the author. Cause like the vibe used to be that like the midlife crisis was sort of invented by the boomers. There's no crisis, just do difficult shit and just get through it. Right.
Yeah.
So then you have the midlife crisis, and like they said, the Xers sort of like they might have it a couple times. For me, if I'm prototypical like early millennial, it's 1980s birthday, like I think this crisis for me has become a feature and not a bug, which is kind of the connection you're pointing to. I don't know if it's happening to me or I'm doing it to myself, but it's this feeling that I'm having on my own clock somehow. And it feels like it's happening outside of me, but it's some synthesis of also inside. And I don't know, like I'd be interested to know if I really reach that midlife crisis, because I feel like I'm on a like crisis every 4 or 5 years path. And I don't know if that inoculates me or I got a bigger one coming. But the truth is, like, if you talk to people who, especially not even 90s birthdays, but people who were born in, let's say, the early 2000s, who are the new professionals in this field. We work with a couple of these guys. Like one of my favorite guys I work with is named Mike Carr, and he's so smart. Like he was just doing DRM stuff when he was like 15. We kind of met him in the basement at Agora and said, why don't you come into our pirate boat? Like this might be a better place for you. The question doesn't even occur to him because it's all upside down. Like by these terms, I don't know if there's a point where he's not experiencing a crisis, but it doesn't feel negative to him. It's just like literally every day, the parameters he's existing in could have a totally new shape every day. That will wear you out in a certain way. But if you make it your norm, and if you make that flexibility your norm, then you're fully accessing everything. And you just have to make sure that you're nurturing like your human needs. And like, that's why the kids in that stuff, if you're Mr. Capitalist internet guy, you're 24/7 and you're doing 17 projects and there's all these different streams that are flowing in and out of you. It's kind of nice to plug into these middle-aged things. Kids are very linear. Like my toddler doesn't need me to like feed him 17 times later this week. He needs me to feed him 3 times every day. You can't say to him like, wow, this is great. Like I can financialize this for you. Like 17 times on Friday is technically more than 3 times for the next 5 days. And like the discount rate is appropriate to the amount of time that's passed, which is, we live that lifestyle with everything. We live it with our sleeping habits. We live it with our eating habits, with our business habits. Things come in these very volatile and sort of these packets that are very uneven. And you need some things in your life. For me, it's my kids, animals, like, things that connect you to what's going on, like in the linear world of biology. For other people, it'd be different. Dan goes surfing. So Dan like connects to the ocean. The ocean has a daily pattern and a monthly pattern. And if Dan's not connected to that pattern, like he loses it. He's like a merman. His powers are dissipated. Or like Julie has another example. I mean, she's actually really big into gardening, right? And so she has this other thing that she's aware of that has this seasonal pattern that is decorrelated to what all these other market flows are. And so I think that if you want to generalize this stuff across these generational frameworks or these crisis versus reinvention sort of operational frameworks, one of the best models I've had is just to say like, your job is to try to coordinate multiple tempos. You might have one tempo that belongs to your family life or some of these more biological tempos. You might have one tempo that relates to that sort of like that life stage planning, like, well, now we're early age, now we're middle age, that like marriage tempo. You might have a tempo that relates to project startup and project creation. We all know there's a tempo that relates to industry watching and, niche rise and fall and kind of that microeconomics of what's happening in FinPub and what's happening in ecom. And you've got to have a surface of contact to that tempo. And then you have your like rest of the world macroeconomic tempo. And then you have your vibes of your social group tempo. And you're not going to be able to vibrate. And I think this is where like these people who are taking the Jungian work are taking it further, because this is just the problem that Jung is beginning to deal with because of when he's at is like, there seems to be a disconnection between some of these more antique tempos and like the particular tempo that the modern world seems to be moving at. Like, how do we reconcile? So we're reconciling 17 tempos, and we are having a little bit of some meta tools in tempo recognition and tempo reconciliation. We're playing one beat with our toes and one beat with our fingers and one beat with our nose. And that to me is probably the skill. And the answer I'll state is the same, which is you can't really do this with one brain. And that's why we all use this technological prosthesis and the apps and all this stuff. But I think trying to connect yourself to a hive mind and trying to connect yourself through a network of people who can play different tempos for you and like help you with those switches and help tune and coordinate you. It's just too much. It's really too much to do yourself. That's the dirty secret. I appreciate the way that you come to it with that honesty. And I probably have a couple of follow-ups for you, but we're all still a little macho. And it used to be that old sort of cool old Clayton Makepeace macho, like, hey, I can do this. No problem. I'm the big dog. Like, I got this. And now we're all in a little like touchy-feely, the dominant Gen X, early millennial macho, where like we recognize that we're stressed and we recognize that we have feelings and reactions to things. And we're using like a little more of a therapeutic language. But I think we're all masking to some extent like that we all are like have a total inner basket case. But how could you not? That's the stimuli that we are consuming. If you're not somewhat of a basket case and you're not involved in like tearing yourself down mentally on some regular like repair schedule, to be honest, I don't know what the fuck rock you're living under, because the world is at a pretty fast place and pretty complex right now. So I just think it's turning that into a norm. And to get back to your original question, no, I don't think it's something weird about you. I think it's a perception of like the environment you're in and the way that it may or may not be out of tempo with some of your other areas of accountability, right?
Yeah, 100%. Look, I get it. I know there's so many communities, I'm doing air quotes, communities for entrepreneurs out there, all filled with their own version of overnight experts chirping at you from behind the screen. You got your Facebook groups, your clubhouse rooms, just experts galore. How often do you feel like you're being pinballed around from thing to thing and picking up a little bit, a little piece there? How much of that is actually making it into your brain and your fingers and your business and affecting your money? How many of these people are actually out there in the field getting their hands dirty and testing to find out what actually works and what flops? Well, in the Copy Chief community, a real community, you get shoulder to shoulder with the most active, successful marketers working in the trenches today, all while learning from industry legends who rarely teach anywhere else, if ever. Copy Chief is an amazing community, super newbie friendly. Also, you'll find, elite level marketers and copywriters in there. They're all working to become the best at their craft, get paid top dollar for their skills, stay ahead of the competition by keeping their finger on the pulse of what's working now. That's the X factor when you're backed up by a community and you can get any question you have answered by people who actually do this stuff and can tell you from real world experience what to do for your project, for your offer, for your funnel, for your clients. Man, you're unstoppable when you've got that kind of confidence. Go check us out at copychief.com/join. If you've never been a member, you're going to see what you've been missing and you're going to say, where has this been all my life? And if you've been a member in the past, I would invite you to come and check out all the new stuff. We've completely updated all the tech. So we're on brand new platforms. Everything is slick and smooth and easy to access. And it's never been better. Copychief.com/join. I'll look for you inside. I somehow follow every word you're saying. I feel like you've been this way since you were like 13. Have you?
I don't. My other kid who just came home, he's 9.5. And so this is the other thing too. Like, you want to talk about Jung. How did your father raise you and what kind of world did he prepare you for? And like, how does his voice stay, or your mom or whatever?
Right.
So much the way I see the world is some things that my dad was thinking in the 80s and 90s that were really like vanguard shit in that world, because I was just exposed to his daily life. And now, really by virtue of this working schedule, which I also appreciate, my kid is a ride along with a lot of what I'm doing. So what seems to me to be like these fun flowers of thought and talking to Kevin Rogers and saying Yoda shit, and I'm like straining to find the thread of it. Like, to him, that's just literally the way the English language works. Those are ordinary, common, even boring thoughts to him. And then he's going to be able to build on that in his own way. So it's all part of a shared conversation that we use to try to figure out where we are and what's confusing us. And so, again, what I would say to anyone who's feeling in some of those same ways is like, no, it's not you. Your confusion is a virtue. I think that's what, to some extent, people are still looking for in copy is, even if it's knee pain, like there's some degree of meaning making that's very hard to access right now. And the right way of providing meaning making is not, you're not going to step into that role of the Jungian grandpa and be like, oh, well, yes, I know. And it is this. More likely, you're going to say, oh my God, I'm on the front lines of this thing and it's making me into a fucking basket case. But together in my community, like, we can organize it. Geez, I think the best way to point it is this way at the moment. And that's what passes for insight, or that's what passes for like comfort for us is just to be on an adventure together, trying to figure out the next move. So, I mean, what I would wonder is like, to you, when you're talking about the particular stage that you're experiencing in life right now, how does it look different to you than it did 10 years ago? I like talking to the real old timers. I like talking to Lee Euler, like to just try to see like, where does this mindset take you after enough time? For Kevin Rogers, what's the difference in the way it feels to do your day? In the most tangible sense, how is your day different than it was 10 years ago?
10 years ago? Oh, goodness. Well, I have time for the first time in a long time. And it's really only been in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's relevant 10-year period because I started Copy Chief almost 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years in September. I would wake up every day feeling like, what am I doing? What am I building? What does it look like? Thinking about survival and trying to click into the thing that shines some sort of beacon for where you should be headed. Now, I've been through so many iterations of my own personal place within this industry and with Copy Chief. And recently, even just this year, having landed on what I really believe will be the next 10 years for how I operate it, I'd say the biggest change is that I really wake up with purpose is a wrong word because I always felt purpose, direction, focus, and vision. Now, again, I don't know if this is a relative state of being when everything starts to become relevant because it's on your mind, right? But ever since that moment, every conversation I have, including the ones we've been having, are so in line with everything I want to do and planning and feel passionate about that it just signals you that this is absolutely the right thing and it's been worth waiting for because you had to go through all these other iterations to arrive at it.
Yeah. Like you're getting a click. Like you're getting a click and you're getting a positive feedback feeling.
And I think it's relevant to what we've been saying is like, that's all you can do. You talked about that your stomach will turn when you're in the wrong place. That's so scary for people because it's like, well, but maybe I'm supposed to muscle through this for a little while more, or do I run from it immediately? Yeah. Because the consequences of changing can be drastic based on your scenario, right?
I think that's a really great question. One thing that I'll probably be plugging some sort of educational material with this. We're doing like a kitchen sink of all the courses we did over the last year or two. And I've been working with international people a lot and just people who are dealing with really different economics. And so I try to be really careful to say, oh, well, you can just uproot this. And well, you can just do that. Because I'm literally dealing with people who like still have on the outer edge of the network, like goat herding responsibilities.
Yeah.
On the outer edge of the network, the financing problem is how to get $5 to make sure that the internet connection is good for the next month. I try to take a step back and sort of say, like, I'm not prescribing someone to say, oh, well, like, if you feel trapped, therefore gnaw your leg off. Right. It's more to recognize the feeling that it's not working for you. And then don't blame that on yourself and don't blame that in the situation, but recognize the pain signal that's saying you and the situation are not in a perfect fit. Yeah. And then what you'd like to be able to do from there is like operationalize my plan for getting my foot out of the bear trap will be this. And like, if only it were that easy. There are times where if you were to just talk about financing, maybe I'm in a contract I don't like or in an economic reality I don't like, but I need to draw out that remaining dividend there in order to be able to reinvest. And that's the classic, like, should you quit your job today or tomorrow question. And I have advised lots, like all those chocolate studios and yoga studios and all that stuff. It's advising craftsmen who are in some stage of that journey and angel investing around that. And usually what I'll tell people is there's not a good answer to that. It's a really minimal financing question. And so many copywriter conversations I've had is, should I quit my day job for copywriting? And like, there's no good answer for that. You're talking about a startup, you're talking about skills acquisition, you're talking about network building. Like, you're going to need some kind of runway. That day job or whatever it is could be the best cash you have access to. So it all sort of depends on what you have access to, how long it's going to take, like typical financial discounting things. But I think it's a general principle is, sometimes you are going to have to muscle through. If the problem merely was muscling through, figuring out how long to leave your leg in the trap and figuring out which way was daylight, nevertheless, it would still be easier, because that's why we do the LinkedIn project. Is there's this ocean of content on LinkedIn about like positive thinking and how to grind and like how to make each moment productive. I don't want to denigrate it because those things are important. They're building blocks, they're keystones. If that's a new concept to you, then good, but it's not sufficient at all. And that's why every single bit sounds the same. And that's why every single bit can't really be operationalized as anything more than like adrenaline. So the difficulty is when everything is wrong, the solution that you're going to come to is not going to be present to you right away.
Right.
That's to me, the most difficult part is like, I know there's a solution that's not this. And I know that I can sort of summon the endurance and patience, but I got to now live through this part where, and I'm not where Kevin is yet. I haven't found that next click, right? So I'm in a trap and I got no click. I got anti-click, negative infinity clicks, which is an interesting analogy because we play for clicks. Like, and I know it's not right. And like, I can start to like play with numbers and play. How much longer could I stand this? We used to call this, there's the time value of money. That's the financial concept. There's also the time value of bullshit. That's what you're willing to put up with. And then there's like the bullshit value of money, which is like getting paid to put up with things you don't. And you're trying to negotiate that triangle. The right route is not going to be evident. And that new business model, I advise people in more of an entrepreneurship concept. And it's sort of like, well, what business should I start? It's like, do you really think you're going to sit down with a pen and a paper and like figure out your business model? Like, give me a break. Like the only person in the history of the earth who's ever done that is Bezos. Because he was like, oh, books are rectangles. Like that seems like an efficient geometrical shape. That's the only such example you will ever get. That business model is not going to be evident. And like, I think that's the other thing that is very misleading in these type of podcasts, like No Knock, and I think you've taken people into the soil under the earth more than most have. But people don't come on this podcast or on any podcast when they don't have their shit figured out. In the same way that no one's going to write the How I Succeeded in Business book when they're not on a certain plateau of success. So there's this total sampling bias and there's this total silent evidence, even in these miniature career narratives. And I'm a great example of that. Like I'm kind of surfacing now because I think I have some minimum way of explaining and sharing and whatever, but I'm not going to come on this podcast when I'm like, hiding under my bed pillow being like, what the hell am I supposed to do today? What does it all mean? But we all do go through that. And like the one thing that the information economy of knowledge sharing and all this really good content probably doesn't show you is like, not the adrenaline and muscling struggle points, because we can kind of romanticize that, but just like the real hard points of confusion and just being stuck in your, you're in a rut and you can't get it and you're stuck, but you don't know what the next thing is. And like trying to just weather out that winter of discontent, whatever it might be. That's a big part of it. Cause that's one of those flowers grow from shit type conundrums. When we make even the narrative that we make of, Kevin and Aaron are going to talk about this. Kevin's next guest is going to talk about this. Kevin is going to like smell all these flowers and snip them off from the stem. And like, what are these flowers and how can you get them? Whether it be money or rep or satisfaction or all of these things that we want from the career, like there are roots going deep down into some weird shit. That's why you're reading Jung. You're trying to go down into those roots and be like, where does this actually come from in me? Where does this actually come from in these others? And like, that's the mysterious territory. Again, the Jung concepts, if you want to update them to like where we are, it's like you're tapped into not the unconscious of your ancestors, but you're tapped into the unconscious of the other 7 billion people on the planet right now. And the muck that makes when it mixes together when no one's looking is like really weird. And we don't know what it is. We've never done it before. But that's what your roots are reaching down to is who are all these people? What is going on? What is it we want? What are the feelings and vibes that we're feeling? And it's so unstructured and undefined that if you try to shortcut and say, no, it's this is my model, this is my vibe, like, and you draw your little spreadsheets and you make your little charts, you can come up with something, but those are typically going to be the prematurely optimizing things. And like the things that are going to nurture you a lot of times is like that struggle of confusion and that struggle of displacement and disorientation. Because like if you just as a copywriter, leave alone all this business model stuff or sandcastles of gurudom and all this. Like, just as a copywriter, like if you don't struggle with a really basic sense of like alienation and disorientation, how on earth are you going to write to retail? People are not going to get out their credit card and buy something on the internet from a stranger that has relatively dodgy credentials,
right?
Because they more or less knew what they were about and what they were seeking that day. You've got to tap into the same muck that they're tapped into. And that's like, there's no substitute for living it. I also wonder this, Kevin, like a deeper, darker question that I have been more hesitant to ask in public forums. Okay. So this will be fun for you. Like, do you feel now with where you're at, the unstructured muck that you're able to tap? I'll just speak for myself. Like the unstructured muck that I'm able to tap into is working for me better on the enterprise side and the copywriter and client relationship side, because I'm kind of more directly connected to like the disorientation and alienation that smaller subset of people is feeling. And like, I have a feeling of losing contact with the muck and the soil of the retail side that probably can't be explained by anything other than the fact of making too much money. I can relate to it by these proxies and these theories, but I don't feel like I'm quite down in the mud of it. Like, I don't feel like I have that same contact with it than like the people who are doing really good copy right now.
That's a really good question. My take is that it's more about being in the muck of that process of being obsessed with how to write the best copy possible. Some people do go their whole life on that mission. I would name Paris. I've never had a conversation with Paris in the 10 plus years I've known him where he's not obsessing on that. It's, to some degree, you get a little more relaxed about it, but he's still producing every day, right? Maybe more of a chief role. But for me, it became more interesting to help people take that energy, guide it a little, but I'm more interested in how do they get into the best situation to be able to obsess and to create and actually get performance data and improve. Because the only way we can improve anything is iteration in front of similar audiences. Like, you know, I was a stand-up for 10 years. You can't develop a joke on paper, just like you can't write a business plan on paper. You can write several versions and your brain will take you to a certain place of, oh, maybe this, but it might have been the second version of it that was better. And so when you get in front of a live crowd, your brain somehow does this magical thing where it's like, no, say it this way. And it might have been the second part you didn't think was as funny, but the fourth part that you presented didn't get the bigger laugh and you found a way to get the second sort of concept in there. You see what I mean? And so it's
the need for humiliation and the need to be brought down to the soil by like in this
sort of
case,
desperation of this is happening right now and I better come up with something. Triggers a part of your brain that otherwise can't be activated. Maybe redefining your version of muck, but I think you were talking more maybe about the market. But for me, the copywriter, it's their job as standard to be able to relate to their avatar and do those things and understand the market. And for me, I kind of like after 10 years was ready to leave that muck of, you know, I did launch copy my whole freelancing career, almost, 10, 12 years. And we would do at least one a month on average. And that's a lot of damn launching, burning out from that. And so that's why, where I put my focus now is on, I love people and I'm endlessly fascinated by what motivates people and how they can maybe move around that. But on that note, if we have the time, I can't miss asking you about the Nigerian copywriting project, because it's so fascinating to me, because when you first introduced it to me, I was like, oh man, like nothing inspires me more than somebody discovering, hey, there's this thing that's become sort of like a stereotype and a punchline in an industry, but I got to actually see past that level. And I see that there's actually some unique wisdom here. There's a lot of courage in the trying to do this. I can see a future where it's not a punchline anymore. It's an actual force in the industry. Was that kind of your experience? And then tell me.
Okay. So this is like a great live example. And this is like the same game we could have played with any of these new ventures or hobbies that I've done in the last few years. Like this is great. You kind of catching me in the act of something. And so like, we're at that exact point where we got a little bit of a click and like we pulled some potatoes out of the earth and we put them up into the air. Everything I'm about to tell you is wrong because it's a theoretical construct and has all been created later. What I think the economics are, why I think it works, the way that the personalities are going to be organized, where I think it plugs into the market. And I'm happy to speak to that because it's fun, but like that would be so misleading for me to say that's how it really happened. The way it really happened was pretty much the way you described, which is to say, who are these people messaging me? Where are they coming from? Wait, what's Lagos? Who lives there? There's 10 million people who live there and half of them are copywriters. Like, wait a minute. They learn English in school. They speak 3 languages. What is this city like? This reminds me of my dad grew up in the Bronx. These people are basically like from the Bronx. Like, okay, so like, how are they trying to get money? Like, how do they regard us? And that started to become interesting because in that same way that we've talked about the way for you, you're interested in trying to figure out how other people are going through the process and trying to figure out how that copywriter brain is nurtured. Likewise, me, that's the copy chief thing. The units of your inquiry or discovery sometimes turn into like individual copywriters and you try to figure out what makes them tick, right? So that's a problem that I've been through several times over. And I think you can detect this tendency, which is either like laudable or not. Like I get bored with things and I get snobby about things, or I feel like I did them before. So I needed like a little bit of a newer version of that. And the other thing too, I'm a little scared of, here would be another deep, dark secret. Like I'm a little scared of onboarding and training American copywriters right now because I have a really poor grasp of what the economics of the business are at this moment, particularly in financial pub, which is something you and I have talked about. And I've talked to Shrifer and I've talked to, we're in a real weird spot with FinPub. The rest of the economics look more conventional, the vitamins and coaching offers and stuff. But given that my specialty has been 70% in financial, I reached this point where I'm like, well, not only am I spending all my time with my kid out on the playground and I don't do any outbound at all, also, like, what is this even? And I used to be able to do that thing where I could snap my fingers and call someone and be like, hey, you, like, yeah, hire this copywriter. And it kind of worked with people I had enough of a pull or connection with. And that's getting really harder right now. And there's a few factors that we can cite. So one thing actually came out of super curiosity about who are these people and what's this city? And is this a different version of what I've experienced? And just following the thread. Another version came out of like, whatever my variety of a moral code is, which is to say, like, I don't know what if I'm onboarding American copywriters, I don't know what fate I'm sort of sending them to because I'm not getting a clear signal. I don't have a clear pipeline and clear signal to say, if you reach this level and if you do these things and if you have these qualities, I kind of think I'll be able to place you and I kind of think I know how it's going to go. And that's just me being paranoid and not trying to bite off more than I can chew. With these guys, I worry about that less because of the economic factor. The purchasing parity is 10-1, right? So I'm sure in our lifetimes in the next 50 years, because growth has to happen and because so many factors are there, like those growth stories that we saw in the 60s and 70s out of South Korea and Taiwan, or what we saw in China, like what we saw in the Baltics, what we saw in Ireland, like all in our lifetime, or whatever those growth markets are now, Vietnam and so on, like you'll see that in sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, it'll be on the cover of whatever Forbes and whatever, The Economist is, 20, 30 years from now. It's actually inevitable and it totally makes sense. So I have a little bit of a curiosity in that long-term trajectory. But in the short term, I'm not trying to make $1 billion. I don't care. I have all the money in the world I need. I have my curiosity. And I also would like to reduce my margin of error when normal innocent bystanders are involved. So like, I don't want my curiosity to come at the cost of someone else's life. Yeah. So when you can buy 10 to the dollar, you have created a margin of safety for everyone involved in an economic transfer. I can pay this collective of African writers. I can put margin in where, like, at the very least, I can lop off half to make sure I have enough on the domestic side. And then they can lop off half to make sure that they have it on their side, subcontracting or just the inefficiency of like arranging their block of hours or whatever. And then like we still have the surplus because it's still worth 2.5 times more. And so I became actually really attracted just from a moral transactional standpoint on the fact that it was really hard to fuck up. The main shift that I've gone through with it came from ChatGPT, because originally my envelope math, and now we'll get to the structural hypothetical part, like, okay, there's 5 million people in the city who think they're copywriters. They all speak fairly good English and they're trilingual. Maybe we could get 500 people into the top echelon of the industry from this group. It could be like a whole army. And from that army could trail out subordinate functions. I was really interested in, there's a pricing problem we all go through where we kind of know what it takes to train a junior copywriter. And sometimes you just need odd jobs done. And if you don't have odd jobs done by apprenticeship, and if you don't have odd jobs done by swing resources in the cost centers, they kind of can't get done economically at all. And it's a problem that we all struggle with, like who's going to write the order page or whatever it may be. Right. And you reach these gaps where there's no function that actually takes care of that. And so that was my original vision of the thing. But once the GPT came out, not what it can do now, which in my opinion is shit, but like another guy in my group is Sam Woods, and he is the evangelist. And like, I really do believe him when he tells me what it'll do in 2 or 3 years. And like, I grasp that. So all of a sudden I thought, I don't know whether we can plug 500 copywriters into the industry. And I don't necessarily know if I even know how to do that. But I scaled it down and I said, well, I sure as hell know that we can plug in like 10. Because I also happen to, in that process, have met the guy who I'm fairly certain is the best guy on the whole continent. And that's not just the copy and not just the marketing thinking, but just that really generalized intellectual and business platform that I need in someone's brain to plug into my hive mind. So this guy, I'll plug him. His name is Andy Mukolo. I'm hoping like later this year, when his collective gets up and running, like with a little bit of juice from me, like that would be a really cool conversation to track this thing. We're just at the very beginning. We're kind of doing it as a training academy and a talent search, but we think we have like the right leader for it. And we think now we have the first wave of candidates that can feed it and become the evangelists of that, who go out and find the other people and just do it as a big talent search. And I think that all that I'm trying to do with it at the moment is I'm trying to repeat the way that we formed the original agency group that I led, like circa 2016. And it's not just to try to do it ass backwards in a different way on a different continent, like, in a different vernacular of English, but is also like, I'm not afraid of screwing it up because I know the economics are favorable. And that's like, I don't know if I could or would restart my agency, concentrated agency interaction again in 2024. And it's not just the change in me as I go through this like middle-aged life stage. It's also just the change in the market. I'm not sure whether it's wise to even build a structure that big that has that many overheads right now because of that level of uncertainty. And so like, I just feel like it is tickling me to come up with this mirror version or this 2024 version of some of the initial conditions of the agency. And then I think for that, maybe it's a relatively low cost model. And then maybe from that, I could sort of look at like, what are other replications? Because you're talking about copywriters, like, I'm pretty interested in this notion of what you can do in this group size, like what you can do, because this is the group size that's comprehensible to me, like what you can do with that group of 10 or that group of 12, where you have 7 or 8 of them who are more like copywriters or more visionary meaning making people. And then you have a couple of like sympathetic ops resources and you kind of turn them into a band. But I think that's taking new shapes, and like the way it's taken shapes around like my mentees has been very different. Like what it's been for Dan is very different than what it's been for Ning and what it's been for Julie and so on. And so like, I'm always trying to offer what I can to people who are trying to start a collective around their own talents or around their own personality. And this just is the particular collective that relates to, it's a whole continent, but it's also in a way just one guy. It's the way to unlock what I think is inside this one particular guy. And that's just the model that is available for that.
Can I ask if you know why copywriting there? How did they hook into it? Why are so many people interested in it?
I sometimes have thought that it's almost like sometimes there's a path dependency and sometimes there's no answer. Like, why did that particular grain of sand produce the pearl and the oyster at that particular site? Like we have a inchoate latent ability to produce pearls. why is Bangalore the IT center? Well, in that case, it has to do with Bangalore is because of its location, what it was in India, its location to the technical university and the way that it really. So very often it's like the way that older networks kind of are still written into newer networks. So in this case, like to me, it was always the sales culture, the literal culture of the city. And the way that everyone from all of these different, Nigeria is a modern nation. So it's like gigantic and it's many terrains and many tribes and many experiences like coming together in a melting pot. So the melting pot thing, the culture of the city being like kind of a hustling sales culture. People
prices,
negotiate. It's like a little bit of the Western African cultures are sort of marketplace cultures in that same way that like I'm more familiar with like sort of a Mediterranean culture, but it's not that far off. I mean, literally speaking, those were integrated trading networks at one or another time in history. And then the multilingualism has been really important to me. One thing I thought initially, I was surprised, like I kind of thought the person who would be the prototype would be someone who was at the intersection of like the university culture and that sort of global touching elite culture with like more of the polyglot, multi-ethnic and, marketplace culture. But the guy that I'm working with, who's the hub of the whole thing, I mean, like his grandparents, they're doing something in a river. I think it was fishing. I just know he's from the river district and the river district ain't Lagos. It's unbelievable. And I love that part of it. And there's something, anywhere there's rapid growth, you have a little bit of like an American dream type narrative of the 19th and 20th century, which is just people's fates can be transformed really quickly and people's lives and their cultures are like turned over and like tilted. There's not a lot of people who can stand the tilt. And the thing that we tend to need as like 2024 global capitalists is we need people who are not seasick. And I think that in addition to all those other factors, like the culture that pre-exists and the melting pot and the multilingualism and the hustling and the striving and all that, it's a pretty good filter. Any big city is a pretty good filter for finding people who don't get seasick with the new client, seasick with the new language, seasick with like the new metagame or the new objective, which is changing. I think you could maybe do that in other places, but just with the English and just with the economics, it's like, to be honest, like almost any big global city, it's a giant fucking like nausea chamber. You can find one person in 10 million who like doesn't puke when you spin them around 700 times in a row. And that's this guy. And that's what we need. And that's who we are, weirdly enough. And that relates to the earlier conversation. So it's just also when you see your double or when you see that affinity to someone who's in a totally different circumstance, in a totally different place, and you're like, whoa, like somehow you're like me. And that's what it is how many times can I tilt-a-whirl you? That's been the common thread for me. Well, actually, no, you puke. We talked about that. Or no, you do puke, but you get right back up and you turn around again. That's the people I'm looking for. And like, I haven't been there. So part of the ambition is just to get me there and be like, what the hell is going on with you guys that you guys in globalism are like in this one site that is like weirdly Bronxy, sort of Mediterranean-y in these ways that I can recognize, and you're getting spun upside down, like, and you're experiencing even more the sight of this globalization and automation, and like you're directly exposed to this thing, and like either you're not puking or you're just walking around confidently with all the puke on your shoes. Like, you are my people. Tell me what that is. So, and then the other things, like just to put in a plug for some of the things I'm involved with, like the angel investing thing for the last few years has been huge. So what for me a copywriter is, and building copywriters and building copy chiefs, is like this internet capitalism allows us to build economic structures around units of like one person and affiliates, and like a small group is economically powerful and economically coherent. And that's true for computer programmers, but I don't know anything. But I also know it's true for wordsmiths. And because I got bored or was looking for a new challenge, like I tried to find people who are in an analogous role where one craftsman had a lot of economic organizing potential inside of one human brain that the machine couldn't do. And so like that truck factory or that chocolate factory or, all these other things really are businesses organized around extremely unique craftsman skill or ego that resides in one person more than a lot of others, and then trying to help them figure out how to connect to the marketplace and build a team around them. And again, the common thing would be like, I mean, bravery is the wrong word. Bravery is that again, what I described earlier as the Masterson sort of make peace, sort of like confrontation of the Jungian shadow. It's not bravery. It's just the comfort with feeling seasick, the comfort with feeling ill and disoriented, and the ability to push through disorientation. Those have been the people who I think have affinity with me. And so this Nigeria thing has started out as being one version of it. And then what it becomes, I don't really know.
So interesting. It's so cool to just jump in and discover as you go, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Antonym to the idea falsely that the bar napkin business plan. Well, even that's not going to come true. I'm sorry. Even though it only fit on a bar, it's
even the bar
momentum.
The bar napkin thing. And again, like this is where my question comes in and where I really love the conversation with you and other people who are sort of expert practitioners who made their own way. Like I really could just be crazy. So like I submit that for everyone's, collective like vetting. But like to me, like that bar napkin concept in like 20th century business culture, if it's like Don Draper or whatever, is supposed to represent those mucky sort of unstructured roots of an idea that later becomes bureaucratically formalized. But in my experience, and I think where we are in 2024 is to even be able to do the bar napkin diagram is to have traveled several stages of conceptualization further than those roots of discovery and disorientation as they actually are developed. The reason that I resurface every now and then and put my name out there a little, other than like putting the name of my people out in a difficult hiring environment, I can just barely sort of bar napkin the shit that I'm working on. But that means what the real forge was maybe a year or two ago. The bar napkin is not the beginning of it. It's probably more like the middle. You want to talk about middle passages. Bar napkin stage is the middle. The bureaucratic stage is its realization. And then the bear trap stage is when you kind of bureaucratically realizing the thing that you created. And then I guess to use the terms of the discussion, like you're literally like, oh, I don't feel sick enough anymore. I'm on land too much. Like I now know where I am. It's almost like wanderlust, I guess, or like these sea captains who like, made their wives wait at home while they're out hunting whales. It's like, no, I got to go again. You got to go. Like you just got back. And we drive our spouses crazy. I think that'd be a whole other discussion.
They should have a podcast.
They are the ones who need the podcast, right?
In mastermind. This has been tremendous. My brain hurts in the best way. I'm sure you get that. I love getting to know you. I will absolutely link the bundle that you guys are putting out. I think it's a really cool taste of, again, there's no way. Talk about a copywriter with a problem. Try writing a sales letter about everything you're doing.
Oh, I can't. You should look, you look at the website. It's totally like, it's no more coherent than anything I just said. It's a very fair warning. And most of the messaging is like, this is probably not for you. I don't think you're going to like it. It's probably going to make you feel uncomfortable. Like, please go away. I don't want to do harm to you. It's like anti-copyright.
If you wouldn't have gotten on the further bus in 1965, don't get on this bus,
There's a nice velvet rope principle in that, but it's literally just, I really don't want to waste anyone's time. I want to be really clear what they're getting in for. You're not going to get any how-to about anything, and you're going to be much more confused than you were when you started. That is my brand promise.
I hope there's no 30-day refund, because there's been a horrible mistake if somebody's asking for that.
No.
All right, great. We'll do it again, Aaron. I hope best in all your endeavors, and we'll certainly be continuing our conversations around our dual focus. We haven't even touched on what it means to be a copy chief and those things, which you're a wealth of knowledge on. So I'd love to do another one on that soon with you.
And I just want to shout out, if anyone who knows me knows I don't listen to industry content. I don't read copywriting textbooks. I don't like copywriting stuff. But the plug I'll put in for Kevin, and I've been kind of just thinking all along about the reference you gave to Jung and stuff, is like, the thing I do like about this particular podcast is like, if you talk about success, I mean, it's just like what Tom York said. It's just like the buzz of a refrigerator. I mean, I couldn't be any less interested in someone explaining their success. But you're not afraid to talk to people about their fears and their anxieties and their failures because you're not afraid of going there yourself because you've been in those environments like stand-up comedy where that's feature and not bug is like the humiliation of failure. I like that about this podcast. And I think there's a vulnerability to it that you're bringing out of people. And I appreciate that. And that's what I think is valuable.
I really appreciate that. You talk about driving people nuts. That's why I want to live all the time. I'm just like, can we get past the chit chat and tell me what's tell me what's scaring you?
0 to 60. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, brother. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Take care.
Hey, don't forget your goodies. Head over to copychief.com/copychiefradio to get some great free stuff to help you put the things you hear on the show into action for your business. copychief.com/CCR.